Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's update on Hurricane Lee. So Hurricane Lee has actually weakened slightly since this morning, and as of 5 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, Friday, September the 8th, Hurricane Lee has maximum sustained winds of 150 miles per hour, a minimum central pressure of 942 millibars, and west-northwesterly movement at 13 miles per hour. And then Tropical Storm Margaret continues to spin in the eastern Atlantic main development region with 40-mile-per-hour winds, a pressure of 1,005 millibars, and west-northwesterly movement at 17 miles per hour. Looking at the latest cone for Hurricane Lee, Lee is expected to remain a major hurricane through at least Wednesday afternoon now, while it passes safely to the north of the Lesser Antilles, U.S. British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and looks like to the north of the Turks and Caicos and Bahamas now over the next 5 days. So looking at the latest Zoom Earth satellite imagery and cone for Hurricane Lee is looking a lot more disorganized than he was looking yesterday and this morning. And this is because Lee is dealing with some pretty strong southwesterly wind shear now that has encroached upon the system. You can see a lot of the cirrus clouds are being blown to the north and northeast, and this is indicative of the wind shear really impacting the system. Even down, you can see some of these clouds down here to the south getting blown northward into the hurricane, and this is actually serving to weaken this hurricane as it moves to the northwest. So looking at the latest forecast cone, no longer expecting a Category 5 anymore. By Saturday 1 a.m. Central Time, a 145-mile-per-hour Category 4 major hurricane moving to the northwest. By Saturday 1 p.m., 140-mile-per-hour Category 4 major hurricane moving to the northwest. Sunday 1 a.m., 140-mile-per-hour Category 4 major hurricane moving to the northwest. And then Sunday 1 p.m. Central Time, slight strengthening to a 145-mile-per-hour Category 4 major hurricane moving to the northwest. Monday morning, 145-mile-per-hour Category 4 major hurricane moving to the northwest. Same with Monday afternoon. Going into Tuesday afternoon, 140-mile-per-hour Category 4 major hurricane curving to the west-northwest and then curving back to the northwest as a Category 3 major hurricane with 125-mile-per-hour winds by Wednesday afternoon. And thankfully, the track keeps shifting to the north. Now, Lee is expected to pass about 450 miles to the northeast of Anguilla, Antigua, Barbuda, the U.S. British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and expected to curve to the east of the Turks and Caicos now. So good news all around for Hurricane Lee. For my friends in the Caribbean, Turks and Caicos, Bahamas, and then I'll get to Bermuda down the road. And then taking a look at the wind shear map, this is what has been a weakening Hurricane Lee. Lee is dealing with about 25 to 30 knots of wind shear right now, which is unfavorable for strengthening, and this kind of wind shear actually helps to weaken these strong systems. And then Lee is expected to continue to deal with this wind shear at least for the next 1 to 2 days as well. So this is why we're no longer expecting a Category 5 hurricane. And looking at the infrared satellite loop, you can see over the last 24 hours that Lee is really struggling with this wind shear. As the eye is closed up, the solid core is struggling to keep itself together, and we see all this convection getting blown to the northeast. So Lee is not looking that healthy right now. Looking at the latest spaghetti model guidance for Hurricane Lee, looks like even more good news for my friends in Bermuda, as now most of the model guidance is taking Lee maybe about 150, 200 miles to the west of Bermuda in about 6 to 7 days. So very, very happy for what I'm seeing here on these model trends. And once again, missing the Caribbean by a safe margin over the next 2 to 5 days. And looking at the intensity model guidance, despite the wind shear, nearly every model keeps Lee a Category 4 hurricane through at least the next 5 days, and a Category 3 through at least the next 7 days. And looking at the GEFS Hurricane Lee ensemble members, The ensembles are keeping Lee well to the north of the Lesser Antilles, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and we do have a couple members that are getting close to the southeastern Bahamas and Turks and Caicos. I'm going to keep an eye on that, but right now, uh, Lee is expected to curve to the north before reaching the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos. Once again, looking at Bermuda, most of the models are keeping Lee to the west, although we do have some of these ensemble members getting kind of close to Bermuda. So Bermuda, keep a close watch on Lee over the next several days. I'll keep you guys updated as well. And looking at the European ensembles are showing the same thing, except we do have the European model ensembles getting Lee close to the Turks and Caicos and Bahamas. So Turks and Caicos, Bahamas, keep an eye on Lee, and Bermuda, the European ensembles are also getting Lee very close, and we have some models going over Bermuda in the European ensembles. And then, if you live across Nova Scotia, Atlantic Canada, in about 8 to 10 days, pay close attention to Lee, as the majority of these ensembles of the European are moving Lee into Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and New Brunswick. And before I close the video out, I'm going to be reading the key messages for Hurricane Lee. Lee's core is expected to move well north of the northern Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico this weekend and early next week. Dangerous surf and life-threatening rip currents are affecting portions of the northern Leeward Islands. These conditions will spread westward and northward, affecting Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, the Turks and Caicos, the Bahamas, and Bermuda through the weekend. It is way too soon to know what level of impacts, if any, Lee might have along the U.S. East Coast, Atlantic Canada, or Bermuda late next week, particularly since the hurricane is expected to slow down considerably over the southwestern Atlantic. Regardless, dangerous surf and rip currents are expected along most of the U.S. East Coast beginning Sunday and Monday. Continue to monitor updates to Lee's forecast during the next several days. As the key messages are mentioning, if you live anywhere across the Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Turks and Caicos, Bahamas, east coast of the U.S., and Bermuda, there's going to be life-threatening rip currents and surf from Lee, so make sure you're staying out of the water if you live in these areas over the next several days. Thanks for watching this evening's update on Lee. I'll continue to provide updates over the next several days, but all good news with this evening's update. Please stay safe and have a wonderful evening, my friends.